Have you ever noticed how easy it is to spot your friends' patterns, but how difficult it can be to spot our own? For example, your friend's dating yet another narcissist, and it's so glaringly obvious that she's repeating the same type of relationship pattern. Or maybe a friend of yours is sabotaging their career. You can kind of see how they're making bad decisions over and over again in real time. And when you try to talk with them about it, it's really hard for them to see it from your point of view. Now, when it comes to our own patterns, they're very, very difficult to see. And even once we do start to see them, once you're aware that you have a certain pattern, it becomes really difficult to change it, to do anything about it. And part of it is because we're so fuzzy on it. We're unclear. And just trying to change something that we're unclear about is like trying to push a boulder uphill. Now, I had this very contradictory and paradoxical experience a few years ago. This was in the winter of 2023. And during this time, I was meditating a lot. I'd wake up very early in the morning, meditate for a few hours. And then every once in a while, I would have this profound experience, this satori. And while I'm having this satori, there would be a total merging, a oneness, total bliss. And this is the type of experience that people meditate for years chasing. And here I was having it. And then a few hours later, I would walk down to my basement and I would smoke a cigarette. And so we have this paradoxical contradiction. On one end, I'm having this super conscious, blissful experience. And a few hours later, I'm having this unconscious pattern where I'm smoking a cigarette. And this contradiction, for some time fascinated me, because how can both of these things exist within me at the same time, a few hours apart? And even though I was aware that I was smoking, I knew I was doing it. It was not an unconscious pattern. There was still a lot of unconsciousness within the pattern because I didn't understand why I did it or how I was doing it, how the process was leading up to me smoking a cigarette. And so in this video, I'll share with you 5 ways where you can discover your patterns and start to get really to the core of them. Sometimes what you're doing isn't in your best interest, and nevertheless, it has like this hold over you. And I'm sure that you have your very own version of it. Maybe you want to quit social media. Maybe you want to stop doom scrolling. And so what do? You delete a bunch of apps. You delete Twitter and you delete Instagram and TikTok and maybe even Tinder. You delete all these apps, right? And you go on a detox where you're not going to use them. And then a few days later, you download it again. You download the apps and you engage in the same behavior. Maybe you want to set very clear boundaries at work or with your friends. And then when your boss comes by and dumps a bunch of projects on you, you just end up saying yes to all of them. Maybe you have this ideal version of what you want your future relationships to be like. And then you work towards it. You're watching YouTube videos, you're reading books, and then at 2 a.m, you're texting your ex. You're repeating the same sort of relationship patterns despite your effort to improve. And finally, maybe you have a more broad vision for your life and how you want life to be like in 5 or 10 years. You have this ideal life that you're moving towards. Yet, when it comes to actually taking action, it's easier just to watch Netflix or play a video game. And so why is it that this happens? Now, the conventional answer is you just need willpower, you need to persevere, then you need to work harder or smarter. But none of this is about willpower. It's not even that you're broken in some sort of way. None of this has anything to do with any of that. In fact, this goes so much deeper that it's actually amazing that we're able to do anything related to willpower whatsoever. And that is because on an average day, you make about 35,000 decisions. That's 35,000 decisions. And out of those 35,000 decisions, 95% of them are made purely automatically. You're making them in automatic mode. And you learn how to do this automatically in the first 25 years of your life. In other words, we're repeating a lot of patterns that we learn. We're doing it automatically. And you can attest to this. Remember the first time you drove a car? How hard it was, how you had to make every decision, how you could make a left-hand turn while turning the radio on, but now you could turn the radio on, have a conversation with somebody, drive, be thinking about what you're going to do when you get to your destination, and so on. This is how far removed we are from making active decisions. And this isn't just you or me, it's everybody. And this brings me to my mission. Now, over the last 20 years, I've been grappling with these sort of questions. Now, my background is in psychology, and I've studied Eastern philosophy and I've practiced it. I practice meditation, and I apply these philosophies to my life, and I've gone through a lot of transformation personally. Now, 10 years ago, I started my career in AI, and I started creating a lot of AI applications. And now I'm combining these two things. First, my mission is to share everything that I've learned through videos like this. And then the second part is to create technology where it makes it really easy to become more self-aware and to become more conscious. Technology that is inherently good for you, that helps you bring out the best version of yourself. Now, this is needed now more than ever. And the reason is the tech companies and the apps in your phone right now, they know us better than we know ourselves. They know what triggers us. They know how to get our attention. They know what will outrage us. They also know what will make us happy. So they can move us and manipulate us as they like. And one of the obvious evidences of this is how embedded they have become in our unconscious decision making. So out of that 35,000 decisions we make a day, a lot of these apps are a part of those decisions, and we do them automatically. And you could think about how many times a day you check your phone for a notification. According to the last stats, the average person checks their phone 146 times a day. And this brings us to the next part. Why can't we see our own patterns? Why is it so difficult to be aware of the things that we're doing, the patterns that we're doing on an ongoing basis? A part of this is that our patterns are structured in such a way that we readily identify with them. We identify with them so deeply that they have become a part of us. So that's one of the big challenges when it comes to identifying patterns. The other part is that they're in such a structure that they're invisible to us unless we study it. A good example of this is language. So for example, right now, you understand English and so do I. We speak English and we're proficient, fluent speakers of the language. But we don't really know or understand the grammatical rules. And in the same way, we don't really know or understand psychology, the hidden drivers that drive our behavior, that drive our perceptions, that help us make sense of the world. We kind of take all of this for granted, and all these sort of layers are invisible to us. And so in this section, I'm going to try to make those layers more visible. One way to think about your life is that you have goals, aspirations, ideals that you want to manifest in your life, you want to bring forth in your life as we're moving towards our values and our goals. Now, there's endless possibilities of ways we could move towards them. And so in some sense, this is what personality is. It's a set of strategies for moving forward. And based on which personality traits you're really high in, it's going to fundamentally change your experience of the world. For example, if you're really high in the trait openness, you're probably enjoying this video a lot because you're naturally curious, you like information, and you're creative. So your way of solving problems in the world would be to do research, to run experiments, and to figure out what works. And so that's one way of solving problems. Another way of solving problems would be what an extrovert does. What they do is they call all the people that they know, they reach out to their network, and they start asking their network, hey, have you solved this problem? Do you know anyone else that has? And so you could see that both the creative solution to solving a problem and the social solution are viable solutions towards achieving the same goal. Let's say being successful or having a good career. They're both viable solutions. Another really viable solution is what a conscientious person does. And they look at what's already worked in the past and they methodically create a plan and they work towards executing that plan that's already worked. It's proven. And so that's an example of how a conscientious person would solve a problem. Now you can think of a scenario where a conscientious person walks into a room. Do they see the room fundamentally different than the person that's creative? And the answer is yes. Each of them could walk into the same room and they'll see it differently. The conscientious person will notice if anything's out of order, if it's tidy, if it's disorganized or not. All these things are going to pop out at them and take up their attention. Whereas a creative person is going to be curious about the person that lives there. What are they like? How do they think? What are they about? They're going to look at their library to see if they have books or not. What type of things did they read? A disagreeable person, a person that's highly competitive, will walk into that same environment, and the things they'll notice would be status cues. They'll notice that whether there's name brand furniture. They'll notice whether there's awards on the wall or diplomas and that sort of thing. That's what they're going to be looking for. And so you could see how the experience of the same exact space is very different based on three different traits. And this extends to social environments, obviously. The extrovert that goes to a social engagement is looking forward to meeting a lot of people, shaking a lot of hands, making acquaintances, and they get a large dopamine reward for it. Their brain literally releases dopamine and rewards them for this behavior. If you're introverted and you go to the same space, what happens is the opposite. You're spending energy talking to people, you're starting to feel drained, and your brain doesn't reward you. So you go home and you feel depleted. Someone that's high in openness goes to that party and they're looking for someone to have a deep conversation with. So this is how deep personality goes. The personality literally affects how you perceive the world. It does this a priori. In other words, it happens before you have all the information. It's a filtering system. So you never get to see all the information. We simply just don't have enough time. We don't have enough time to process all the information in front of us. This is why when you're watching something, you don't notice everything. You have to focus your attention. You're focusing your attention because it's just too much information to take it all in. This is why we need to count. Like if you were to count how many books you have on your bookshelf, you can't just look at your bookshelf and know. You need to count because you can't just take it all in. So that's a really good example of how our perceptions are automatically filtered. They're automatically filtered. Now, as we automatically filter, we give these things meaning. This brings us to the second part, and that is your meaning-making process, your psychoanalytical personality type. Now, this is going a lot deeper because your personality forms the first 25 years of your life, but really what also forms with it is your relationship with the world. And what's happened here is that you have grown up in an environment. You have been thrown in. You got a certain set of parents. You grew up in a certain country with certain cultural values. And all of this was something that you learned and were a situation where you grew up in. And in this situation, you had to figure out from a very early age on what worked and how to get what you want. If you've ever talked to or spent time with a 2-year-old or a 3-year-old, by the time they're 2, they've figured out how to engage with their environment so they can get what they want. And they already have a bunch of techniques and strategies in doing so. And a lot of this comes as a combination of the inherent personality of the baby that is thrust into the world, their inherent disposition, and the environment that they're in, and the type of things that that environment promotes. So, for example, if you grow up in an environment where there's unconditional love, where your parents are very loving to you, they don't withhold affection, and they have unconditional positive regard for you, you're going to grow up with very healthy attachment style. In your future relationships, you're going to come into them assuming the best. You're going to give the other person a chance. Conversely, if you grew up in an environment where love was very conditional, where you had to perform in order to receive it or earn good grades in order to get attention, then when you grow up, you're going to bring that also into and project that into your future relationships, where you're going to be afraid that, hey, maybe if they don't like what I do, maybe they won't love me anymore. And so you might be a little more anxious in your relationships when you get older. You could see how this could be expanded into other areas. How stable was the environment you grew up in? If the environment was unstable, in other words, adults are always fighting, you're always moving around as a kid. Today you're living in one area, tomorrow another. There's fights breaking out at school. You don't know what tomorrow's going to be like. You're unsure if you're going to eat. Unstable environment. You could see how, as an adult, this could lead to someone wanting to have an extreme amount of control over their life. They might become obsessive. Another possibility is that they might have really low trust in their environment. And so it might be really hard for them to move forward with people because they've just been let down so many times. Now, finally, imagine if you grew up in an environment where your parents were, let's say, very, very narcissistic. Now, part of narcissism is that it's very shallow. It rewards things that are superficially good. If it looks good, that's what gets rewarded. But if something is of substance, it's not that valuable because it's appearances that matter. Appearances for a narcissist are far more important than the reality. And the thing that's really important for a narcissist is getting attention and being perceived for being grandiose, larger than life, and so on. And so now imagine a family like this that has a child or a bunch of children. Now the father in this, let's imagine that the father is very narcissistic. How is he going to behave towards the kids? Well, probably he's only going to give them attention if they do something that enhances that father's own self-image in some way. For example, if the child is beautiful, maybe the father will take more pictures with them. Maybe they'll get rewarded. Maybe he'll take them to the office more often. If the kid comes home and let's say they bring home a B, the father might shun them and not even give them any positive feedback, even though, let's say, the child studied really hard to get that B. And then let's say that their brother cheated and got an A. And then the father said, hey, this is what you need to do. You need to cheat in order to get ahead. Whatever you need to do to get ahead, do that. So imagine how that's going to change the approach for the children growing up. They're just going to focus on that superficial thing that they get the A. It doesn't matter how they got there as long as they got there. So the other thing is that they wouldn't go very deep and know their emotions or their states very deeply. It would just be about how things look. These are examples of psychology that goes really, really deep at a root level from a very young age. Because as you're a kid growing up, it's not that you're having a few good or bad experiences or traumatic experiences. That's not what your childhood's about. What your childhood is about fundamentally is that you're growing up in an environment that's teaching you what the world is. It's teaching you who you are. It's teaching you how you ought to behave. In other words, you're learning about how to relate to the world. You're learning your relationship with the world. And this brings us to our values and beliefs. Now, a lot of our values and beliefs are inherited in our family situation, in our overall cultural situation, and we tend to value the same things that our society at large values. For example, today being materialistically successful is considered extremely valuable. Everyone wants to make it. A lot of people want to become rich and famous. We see this predominate our culture. It predominates it in such a way that it almost doesn't even matter how you got rich anymore. It doesn't matter if you're a grifter, for example. It really doesn't matter. What matters is that you got there. This is to some degree true for a lot of people. We see how this could have come to be in terms of how they grew up and to how these values aren't values that the person chose. It was a set of value systems that they were thrust into, that they were thrown into from a very young age. They grow up and they start to see, oh, this is what our society values, and then they want to go after those things that are considered a value. Then they're using their personality traits, their natural predispositions, the things that they're naturally good at, to achieve those aims and goals. So this is the thing about values. On one end, values are great because it gives you something to strive for. At the same time, values have the negative side that they're an admission that you are not that. If you say, I want to become rich, it's an admission that you are not rich. Then what's happening is that you're actually literally experiencing that. You're experiencing what and who you are. Okay? The other side of the values, of course, is that sometimes the values are not as valuable as we think. Sometimes we're chasing valuables that actually lost a lot of their value. So next, let's talk about beliefs, because beliefs and values are deeply intertwined. One, your beliefs about the world and yourself inform you what you believe is valuable. And so your values, in some sense, come out of your beliefs about yourself and the world. The other thing is that you might have values, things that you believe are valuable, but you don't believe you could attain, and so you don't chase after them. So, for example, we could all think of people that value becoming wealthy, but they don't ever think that they're going to be able to get that. They don't think it's for them, right? That's an example of a limiting belief. Next, and finally, we have identity. So, identity in some sense is things that you identify with, things that you say, this is me or this is who I am. This could be related to your job or role. I'm a doctor, or I'm a father, a mother, a brother, a sister, and so on. They could also be related to a habit. I'm a drinker, for example. Now, when we think about our habits, we could think about what level they exist on. How are they a part of our personality? For example, if you're extroverted and you're getting a dopamine hit every time you're moving positively in the world, well, imagine what would happen if you went to a casino and you won a few rounds. It could be very easy to get sucked into, hey, I'm just going to bet one more time. And then you could see how someone that's getting this hit of dopamine internally, because they're winning in the short term, how they can discount the long term. They can end up losing a lot more. You could also see how their belief in that moment, oh, I'm going to win, or I've been winning, so I'm going to win more in the future, how that feeds into it. And then maybe they also have an identity. I'm a winner. I don't lose. And so they're at the craps table, and all three are in play here. When it comes to giving up bad habits, it could be really hard because we might feel like we're losing a part of ourselves, a part of our identity. And a common example of this is a drinker. Your classical drinker might think about quitting drinking, but then they're thinking about what they're losing. They say, oh, I'm not going to get to drink anymore. It's so delicious. Oh, I like the way it makes me feel. I'm not going to be able to go out with my friends and socialize anymore. What will I do? Who am I without this? So now it comes to an identity crisis. Throughout our lives, as we change and go from one stage of life to another, we're constantly confronted with identity dissolution. At some point or another, you transform so much that you're no longer the same person. A part of your identity falls away. When you were a kid, before that you were a baby, and your baby identity fell away. And then your kid identity fell away and you became a teen. And in some cases, you didn't even want anything to do with that identity. If you talk to like a 5-year-old, don't ever call them a baby. They have moved on, okay? So one day, if you're a parent, your kids will grow up. You might have empty nest syndrome, where you feel like your role has fundamentally changed. You're no longer the mother that you used to be. That's part of it. Another might be your occupation. You retire, or you get let go. You're no longer that identity. And so you have this identity dissolution. Now, all of these things contribute towards how we make decisions automatically. All of them. Your personality automatically filters the world, gives you a way to move forward. Your values isn't something that you're deciding moment to moment. Instead, what they are is they're filters in real time where they filter your environment so you could see them very easily. If you're a young single guy, you will notice all the beautiful women when you walk down the street. You probably won't notice the older people. You probably won't notice the children. You won't notice the things that are not important to you. Next time you go out, try to notice red cars or blue cars, and you'll see they'll all just pop out at you automatically, like magic. This is the power of our attention. This is how our values work. They happen a priori. And then, of course, there's our beliefs, which are a structure that organizes all of this, and then our identity, who we are. And what we do in the world is a byproduct of who we are. And our behavior is the fragrance of our identity. If your identity is that of a rose bush, you're going to smell like roses. Finally, we're hitting on culture. And we could see how this whole structure is about us. At the same time, it's a lot bigger than us, right? Our values, our beliefs, we inherited a lot of it, almost entirely. Our language, our culture, we inherited a lot of it. In other words, what we're really like is like the carrot that's in a big stew of soup. You're that little carrot, and what's happening is that this carrot is taking on the flavor and the fragrance of the soup. And at the same time, the carrot is putting out its own carrot flavor. So this isn't just about you and me. It's about us in a very real way. Your problems, they extend far beyond you. They're part of our collective problems. And at the same time, your individual problems, your patterns, are like that little carrot that contribute to the overall larger pattern. So now let's look at what the overall larger pattern is. What is it that our society collectively is producing right now? What is the bigger cultural patterns? What are the biggest shifts that have happened in the last 15 or 20 years? And one of them is that today we're going through the largest mental health crisis in the history of humanity. If you look at the numbers, they're astounding. Actually, shocking. Did you know that 50% of Americans feel lonely some or most of the time? That's 50%. 40 million Americans are anxious and have anxiety or depression. When it comes to depression, since 2007, it has increased by 60%. So the trend line is that depression is going way higher, anxiety is going way higher, loneliness is going way higher, and so is meaninglessness. This sense that nothing matters or nothing means anything. 89% of young adults believe that life is inherently meaningless. Now, none of this is a coincidence. This is a byproduct, and to a large extent, of our culture, providing a certain set of values that are not necessarily as valuable as we think they are. In your personal life, you might have tried to trade some of your patterns, and it's not straightforward or clear how to do that, how to even become aware of them. Now, there's some traditional approaches. You can go to a therapist, you can do journaling, you could meditate. All of these are very, very good ways to get started, to move forward. It's better to do them than to do nothing. But they also kind of lack something. And what they lack is the ability to give you a map or a big picture so you know where you are and where you're going. Also, a lot of times people fall short because these tools are not all that personalized to them. For example, how do you know you're picking up the right book? And what about your unknown unknowns, the things you don't know that you don't know? And so it could kind of be like you're rowing your boat in the middle of the Pacific Ocean and you're trying to get to this destination that you really want to get to, but you don't know which direction to go in. And as far as you could see, it's all blue ocean. And then maybe you go to a therapist, and a therapist could be great, but it takes 4 months or 16 sessions to get any kind of progress. And a lot of people just go for a few sessions. And so how do we untie all of this and get clarity on our own patterns And then so we could in the future do something about them. I'm going to give you a few ways. So first is to start witnessing yourself. Become the witness. What this means is when you wake up, you just start watching yourself as if you're watching a total stranger, as if you've never seen this person before. And believe it or not, you kind of are a stranger to yourself. Because remember, 95% of your decisions are automatic. You're really not there for them. And so you have to watch yourself like you're watching a total stranger. That's one. This is witnessing. And the practice is as follows. When you wake up, you watch what you're thinking. You watch how you feel. You watch how you behave. You watch and look out for any patterns. Patterns will be repetitive types of thoughts. Okay? It could be a repetitive thought, or it could be a repetitive theme, like you're worried about work, or you're anxious about a date, right? But a broader pattern would be that you're anxious about all dates, or most new things, right? You zoom out, you see that the pattern's more clearly, you have anxiety, and this is what it stems from, maybe like the unknown. So that's one, witnessing. When you're the witness of yourself, it's important to remember not to judge. You're not there to judge and evaluate, to give yourself thumbs up or thumbs down, because that itself is yet another pattern, okay? And so all you're doing is just watching and you're just noticing patterns. And you could even get a witnessing journal. I recommend you do this for a minimum of 3 days, all throughout the day, from the moment you wake up to the moment you fall asleep. And do it again the next day and the next day. Do it for a minimum of 3 days, but typically, ideally, this should be a practice that you do every day. That you take a moment, a time out, take a deep breath in, relax, and just watch yourself. Watch yourself as you're watching a stranger. The second is to use friends and family. So there's this really interesting study that showed that we might be unconscious to a lot of our patterns, and when we're asked about our patterns, we were about 24% likely to successfully identify them, whereas our friends and family were far more likely. They were able to do about 75, 76%. And so asking other people about things that they notice about you, patterns, behavioral patterns, is a really good way to get insights from a third-person perspective, which you can't give yourself. Now, the way to do this is first to find people whose opinion and insight you value and you trust. And remember that they're giving you insight into your own behavior. This is not a session for them to vent or to criticize you, but instead to give you an opportunity to improve and increase your own self-awareness. And then you ask a few people, and then you'll notice that if their stories, their observations match. And if you ask 5 friends and 4 of them notice the same pattern in you, then maybe it's a real thing. Third is using AI. Now, the reason why AI is great to use is because it would be the equivalent of talking to a book or talking to the author of a book. But instead of it being a book, it's all books. And so think about this. Large language models, AI, has been trained on all books, all psychology books, all psychology studies, all psychology papers. It knows about these hidden structures like personality, your traits, your psychoanalytic personality type. It could help you identify these things. And it could show you how they could be contributing to your behavior. It can help you identify your value system. It can help you become aware of hidden beliefs. And one way you can use this is you can go to ChatGPT. Now, ChatGPT has a history of every conversation you've had with it. And so you can ask it questions like, based on all of our conversations, can you tell me something about myself that I don't already know? You can ask it about your personality. Using the big 5 traits, what personality traits do you see me expressing most of the time? It could even ask you a few questions and then get drilled down into what your personality is. Then you could talk about your personality with ChatGPT. You could ask it, do these traits manifest in the world? In fact, I have a resource below, and you could see a number of prompts you could use with ChatGPT or the LLM of your choice, where it can give you insights into your own psychology and these sort of structures. Next, you can use the game of life. Now, the game of life is something that I built and created, and what it is is a set of games that help you become more self-aware, makes you aware of these sort of hidden structures that you normally wouldn't know about. And then it helps you go deeper and deeper into them and fully start to unpack them and to make these unconscious things open up and become conscious, so you understand what it is and how it works at a deeper level. And so one of the games we have right now is 11 questions. You answer the 11 questions, and at the end, it gives you an insight into how you perceive the world, how you're making sense of the world, what your natural strengths are, and what your weaknesses are, what your areas of growth are. Then you could talk and chat with AI and ask it questions. You can ask it questions about your results. And what it's really designed to do, in some sense, is it's trying to uncover the central conflict that you're having or experiencing in your life right now. And finally, the last is you could use games and tests to increase your self-awareness and self-discovery. There's a lot of games like the Cube game. This is a very famous game where you use your imagination, and every choice you're making is saying something about your world, about your life. And then we're building out these sort of games within the game of life. This also includes psychological assessments, which are another useful tool, and these both go hand in hand. So if you check out the Game of Life games, I have a link in the description. You could check out rest of the games that we have available and psychological assessments. Now, using a combination of witnessing, journaling, community, and then also using tools to become more aware of how these structures work, like using artificial intelligence and the Game of Life, what you can do is you can start to understand the lay of the land. Will really help you reveal what's really triggering you and the hidden patterns that are guiding our life. In the next video, we're going to talk about what to do once you're aware of these patterns, because once you're aware of them, that's just step one. Step two is, well, what do you do next? How do you start to unlock these patterns? How do you start to break them down? How do you start to dissolve them? As was the case for me with the smoking, I became very curious. How was it that, I'm having this amazing experience in my meditation one moment, and a few hours later, I'm smoking. And when I went down the rabbit hole, what I discovered was that a lot of my smoking was structured in certain beliefs that I had about it. And then also in my imagination. And once I started to work on these two levels, the level of belief and then the level of imagination, the habit completely dissolved. I effortlessly stopped smoking. And so in the future videos, I'm going to share with you how I did that and how you could do that. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.